Let's talk about the 9 books that I read in the month of February and also the books that I want to read for March. Now, I know I'm only holding up 3 books here. That's because I read most of the books on my Kindle this month, but I have a lot to talk about because 9 books in 28 days is pretty impressive if you ask me. And also, I'm excited to pull out my TBR jar and use it for the second time as I pick my TBR for March of this year. But first, I want to talk about my statistics from the month of February. As far as my reading goal for the year, combining with the books that I read in January, I'm 25% in my book goal, so I'm ahead by 5 books, and I'm 29% in my pages goal. So honestly, I could up my reading goals if I wanted to because I'm like kind of far ahead. Across the 9 books that I read this month, I read 3,760 pages, and so the average time to finish each book was around 3 days. 11% of the books I read were under 300 pages, 22% were over 500 pages, and then the other 67% were in between 300 and 499. Every book I read was fiction, obviously. I did have quite a range of genres this month. So top is romance, and then contemporary, sports, fantasy, LGBTQ, young adult, science fiction, and then literary. I read a third of the books in print, like I said, those 3 books, and then the rest of them were on my Kindle, so digital formats. And my average star rating for the month was a 4-star. In fact, the lowest rating that I gave this month was 3 stars. So pretty good reading month for me, 2 5 stars. And I just want to get into talking about all the books that I read in order. So let's jump right into it with the first book that I finished this month, which was The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen. Now, this is a very reflective cover, so just like I did for the reading vlog, I'm just going to put an image on the screen here of this book, but I did read it physically. And speaking of reading vlogs, by the way, I do have vlogs for I think at least 6 or 7 of the books that I'm mentioning in today's videos. After you watch this video, go watch the vlogs after. I'll have them linked down below. But yeah, so The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen. This book I ended up giving 3 stars. I had a lot of hope for this book, but I was just not connected to it. I said this in the vlog, but for the first chapter, I was like hooked in. I was sucked into the story. I like had my jaw drop. And then as the story went on, I got just more and more bored, and I actually ended up hard DNFing this book at 40%. And then I woke up the next day, saw one of my favorite creators were reading and loving this book. They posted a vlog about it, and I got FOMO. So I listened to the audiobook for basically the rest of the book, the other 60%. And overall, I just was unimpressed, honestly, by this book. It was just not enough of what it was doing. It had a pretty good setting, makings of decent characters, makings of a good plot, but everything was just lackluster in my opinion. I just did not feel anything for the characters. This book did end on a cliffhanger, but I am not going to be continuing on to book 2 or the rest of the series because I just don't care enough about the book at all. The best part about the book is honestly the cover, which I did use to inspire my February bullet journal setup on my other channel, Mango Studio, but besides that, this book does not stand out to me in any way, shape, or form, and I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This was a 5-star for me. I was super excited to read this book. Now, it was a reread. Okay, I read this book 3 years ago for the first time. I knew that I used to love this book, but in rereading, I thought I would bring it down like a 4 or 4.5. I didn't think it was going to hit as hard as it did a couple years ago because this book and the series around it receives a lot of critiques. I've only read the first 3 books, so I don't know what the rest of them are like. I do think that the book quality does go downhill as far as the first trilogy goes. However, reading this book was just such a fun time, and I really just like was surprised at how much my reading taste now still fits what I used to like, that I gave it 5 stars again on the second read because it was just an amazing experience. As far as plot goes, this follows our main character Poppy, who is the maiden, which is essentially this person whose life is dedicated to being like a gift for the gods, and she's living her entire life until she turns, I think it's either 18 or 20, where she will ascend and become one of the ascendants, which are like higher up. They have powers, they're magical, they're different than just normal mortals, and it is an enemies to lovers with her bodyguard whose name is Hawk. And it sounds like a very, basic story, and it really is not super original, but this book just made me so giddy. Like, I was just eating it up. It's very like engaging, fast paced. You just get sucked in. Hawk makes me kick my feet and giggle. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I love this guy. It had some spicy moments, but it also had some heartfelt moments. I don't know. It was just like a really solid fantasy book. And I know that Jennifer is currently in the middle of continuing this series and also writing the Flesh and Fire series that you're supposed to go back and forth between. So currently I'm going to be rereading the first 3 and then continuing the rest of the back and forth like tandem series read eventually. So yeah, this was a 5-star. Next, I read A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. This is a book that I've had on my TBR for a very long time. I've been really excited to read this this one, but unfortunately I ended up giving it 3 stars. Now this book follows our main character B and Jamie. They've known each other since they were juniors and seniors in high school. Jamie dated her best friend, but they've always known each other, and then it takes them through years of their life up until their 30s as they can kind of come in and out of each other's lives between being friends, lovers, but like never actually getting together, and then having things break them apart, people moving, other relationships, things like that. So it's basically right person, wrong time for like multiple years of their lives. And the concept, you know, you'd think would have a lot of like yearning and passion, and it'd be like very push and pull, and it would like really suck you in and make you cry. And for some people, this is the experience that they have with the book, so if that's you, good for you. But for me, I realized that this just is not the trope that I can resonate with. I got so annoyed of the back and forth between these characters. A couple times I knew it was gonna happen, but then it just got like over and over, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're still doing this. It's so much just like them not being together for reasons that could easily be avoided if they just talked to each other and had mature conversations. And then I also read the 5th anniversary edition, which is what I was recommended to read, because at the end of the book, which is about 380-400 pages, there is an extra 150 to 200 pages from the guy's point of view, recounting the entire story from his POV instead. And so I finished reading so many pages of this back and forth from B's head, and I flipped the page and I have to read it again from his point of view. I was so done with this. I was so done. So because it was a disappointment, I did give it 3 stars. If you love it, I'm so happy for you, but it just wasn't really working for me. But then I read Deep End by Hallie Hazelwood. This is her most recent release, and it was so good. It was so good. So this follows 2 college students. The guy's name is Luca. He is an Olympic swimmer, and then the girl's name is Scarlett. She is want to be Olympic diver. She's not actually an Olympic person yet, I suppose, but basically they're in college, and Luca was dating Penelope, who is one of Scarlett's friends, but they ended up breaking up, and we find out very early in the book, so not really a spoiler, but they do, because Luca is interested in some things in the bedroom that Penelope is not interested in. And then Scarlett, who's hearing this, listening to it, she's like, wait a second, I might be into that. And so they kind of, I wouldn't say like friends with benefit situation, but they end up bonding over their similar desires, things like that. And then it ends up growing into more of an emotional connection. They have just a full romance throughout the rest of the story. I thought this book was so much fun. Now, I did listen to it on audiobook completely. So was the fact that Luca, who is a Swedish character in the book, was his narration from a guy who had an accent part of the bias that went into me loving this book? Maybe. Potentially. Yeah, it was. But sue a girl for wanting to listen to a Swedish guy narrate books for her. Like, I'm sorry, is that so much to ask? No, but genuinely, like, even if I didn't like audiobook this, it was just so amazing. I thought that it was very sex positive, which was great. I thought it was funny. I thought it was relatable as a girl who's also in college and dealing with, you know, busy schedules. The one critique I do have for this book, and that a lot of people mention online, is it's marketed as an incredibly spicy book, and it is really not. I mean, there are spice scenes for sure, quite a few of them, and they get pretty detailed, but I would say that they don't cover any content that is too out of the ordinary. I mean, I've read smuttier books than this, to be fair, and so it was marketed as like really raunchy and everything, and it didn't really deliver on that, which I'm okay with. My issue was not that it didn't have enough spice. My issue was that it was marketed differently than how it actually presents itself. That being said, go into it expecting spice, but not anything like incredibly taboo, and you'll have an amazing time. And listen to the audiobook, please, because the audiobook was delicious. Anyway, this was a 4.5 star, so good. After that, I read The Favorites by Lynn Fargo. I'm obsessed with this cover, and I'm obsessed with this book, okay? This was my second 5-star of the month, and I'm so excited about it because I specifically got a book of the month subscription so I could receive this book. I think the cover is just so gorgeous, and I was really excited about it. So this is another sports romance that I read right after Deep End, or actually at the same time, to be honest. So this follows 2 Olympic figure skaters and their story from like the mid, I want to say 80s when they were children. This is a childhood friends to lovers, to like the mid 2010s, and their experience competing and wanting to be the best and everything. So our main character, Katarina, has always had the desire to excel and be the most amazing figure skater ever. And then Heath is a friend that she meets at the ice rink, and he is a foster kid, and her dad actually becomes his legal guardian for a while before he passes away. So technically they are like foster siblings, but not really. They're basically really close from an incredibly young age. Katarina wants to be the best at ice dancing, but Heath just wants anything that Katarina wants because he loves her so much. So it's a lot of like him doing things to make her happy, but then also later on there are a lot of secrets held in between them, and we get really into the politics around ice dancing, Olympic competitions, things like that. Of course, there's like drugging incidents and enemies in the sport, and it's just so interesting. And this book is also half told in interview format. So half of it is Katerina telling her story, and the other half is like a documentary that they put together about the two of them, and then other people in the story who are being interviewed put their own 2 cents in. So a very fast read. If you like a drama, if you like a little bit of gossip, but also with romance sprinkled in, this is the perfect blend of literary fiction, kind of historical, but also like contemporary, and then romance. It's just delicious. It's so good. I cried at the end, and I gave it 5 stars. So if you want something different and original to pick up, because this is like really kind of a one-of-a-kind story, I recommend. It's so good. Then I read All Systems Red, which is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries series. Is it Diaries, or is it just... Yeah, it is. That was right. So this is by Martha Wells. This was a science fiction, my first kind of dive into sci-fi, and I wanted to do something that was very quick and easy. So this is about 150 pages. It follows a robot named Murderbot, doesn't have a name, and this bot is being owned by humans on, I want to say, some kind of planet somewhere, and it's basically used to help the humans with their mission, whatever it is. If it needs to murder, it will murder, but it will also do other things too. And so this entire time, it's just following orders and trying to resist the fact that it actually has emotions, even though it isn't human, and it cares for people around them, even though it doesn't really want to. It wants to just like follow orders and call it good, but it actually is like scared to feel emotions like anxiety or caring for other people. So it's an interesting like commentary on like what makes something human, like what does it mean to have emotions if you're a robot, things like that. And I get where it's going. It's also kind of dry humorous because like the bot likes to watch reality TV, which relatable. But even though it was only 150 pages and I listened to the audiobook in the span of like a day, I simply was not interested past the halfway point. So I do want to read more genres and expand my taste palette a little more than just like my usual fantasy, romance, literary fiction. However, this one, I couldn't get through the entire 150 pages without being a little bit bored, so a full-length novel would be quite difficult for me. I do want to read at some point the book by Andy Weir that's super popular. What's it called? I'll put the cover on the screen. I can't think of it right now. This I've heard is really good, and that'd be a good chance for me to try out another author's version of sci-fi. But yeah, Murderbot for me. I see the hype if you like sci-fi, but unfortunately I was just not connected to it as much as I wanted to be, so 3 stars was my rating for this book. Then I did my second reread of the month, and that was A Court of Thorns and Roses. This book I've obviously read before, obviously. Okay, I'm a Sarah J. Maas stan. I love her. I read this book, I want to say, in 2020, as well as the rest of the series, but I realized that I've always read them on Kindle. I've never actually owned the paperback, so I'm currently in the process of acquiring all of the paperbacks secondhand so that they are cheaper than buying like the full box set on Amazon, and as I receive them, I'm reading them. So this is the first one, obviously, and it was such a fast read. I forgot how thin the first one is. It's only like 400 pages, whereas the rest of them are like 600, 700. But yeah, this was so much fun. I forgot how much I loved Agotar because I'm a Throne of Glass girl, okay? Throne of Glass, you can't even see it, it's up there, but I have the entire series. It's my favorite series of all time. I adore Throne of Glass. But I forgot how much I also adored Agotar. So it's just been super fun to jump back into this world again. If you haven't heard of this book, you must not be on BookTok. Okay, that's for sure. But this follows our main character, Feyre, who is a human. She lives with her dad and her 2 sisters in a very poor cottage. They lost all of their money. So she goes into the woods and the snow. She's trying to hunt for food, and she sees a wolf and she shoots it because obviously that's food, or at least it's a pelt that you can sell, right? She wants to make money off of it. Turns out the wolf that she shot was actually a fairy, and so a monster comes to their door the next day, or maybe it's that night, and it's like, I'm going to kill you. You killed my fairy friend. Like the monster is another fairy. And she's like, please don't. And he's like, okay, well, I will take you to my house in the fairylands instead, and that will be like your payment for killing my friend, basically. If this sounds familiar, it is because this is technically a Beauty and the Beast retelling. However, the story goes off the rails from here. I'd say about this much of the book is Beauty and the Beast, and then this much is Sarah J. Maas just going off and doing her thing. And if you know the story, you know that this series really changes after this book. This book, like, you have to get through it, you do, when you first read it, especially, but the rest of them are just so different from book 1. So if you're not feeling this one as much, I understand it. Take my word for it. Try book 2. You'll like it a lot better. But that being said, I still gave this 4 stars because it was still so much fun to jump back into this world again. Feyre, my girl, I forgot how much I loved her. I won't say my opinions on the other characters because that could be a spoiler, but it was still a fun time to read this. 4 stars. This was super fun. And then I read another sports romance, my third one for this video, because I did an entire week of reading sports romance. Well, it kind of ended up being 2 weeks, but I read Caught Up by Liz Tomfordy. This is the 3rd third book in the Windy City series, which I'm so glad to work on another series I'm in the middle of. But this is one I've been waiting on reading for a while, and it was so enjoyable. I just forget how much I love Liz's writing. She's so good. But like, this follows our main character, Kai, who is an MLB player for the Chicago Warriors, which I think is like a made-up MLB team. And he has a 15-month-old son named Max. He's a single dad, and he's working on, obviously, this baseball team, but he's debating like if he has enough time to also be a professional player and still be a good father to his son. And then his coach's daughter's name is Miller Montgomery. She is a chef that almost, like, what would you call it? Like a traveling baker that goes and helps luxury restaurants around the country improve their menus. But she's taking the summer off, and so her dad is like, come travel with me in the team and you can be the nanny for one of my players' son. I am like very particular on how I want kids to be written in books. Either they're done well or they're done badly. There's like no in between. But Max in this book, probably because he can't talk, but he was a really sweet character to watch. And just the relationship and the slow family dynamic that grows between the three of them and also the other characters, and Kai learning to be able to balance his life between fatherhood and his job, and Millie learning how to open up and be vulnerable and like actually have attachment and not just like be living in a van around the country 24/7. Like, it was just a really beautiful story, so wholesome, so sweet. I gave it 4 stars. Really good time. And the next book in the series is about Kai's little brother Isaiah, and I am pumped for that book. So I'll be reading it probably very soon because book 5 also comes out this year, and I want to be caught up with the series before I move on to the next book. Okay, and then the last book that I read, I actually finished this morning, so it's the 28th right now, last day of February, and that is Icarus by Kay Ancrum. Now, this is a book I've never heard of before, literally never. I have not seen this blow up on BookTok or anything. It's a very unpopular book, I would say, but the ones who read it love it. This is a book about an art thief. His name is Icarus. He is a senior in high school, so he's 17. This is a young adult book, by the way, and his father is an art thief. So basically, his father has this nemesis named Stuart Black, and he lives in this huge mansion, and he's an art collector. And so what he, Icarus, and his father do is that they will see the art that he collects, they will recreate it like perfectly, and then they'll have Icarus go in and switch it out so that they have the valuable one that they can sell, but Stuart Black never realizes that his art is being stolen, right? So art thievery. Now, the thing about Icarus is he is very particular. Obviously, he is doing something very illegal, and so he has rules for himself. He cannot make friends that last after school. Like, he can't have any friends come over to his house, so he's not very like attached to anybody. He is very much against physical touch. Like, when people touch him involuntarily, he like feels like tingly and like weird. And this all stems from his father basically not being a good father figure for him. He is not able or willing to show Icarus love, and so Icarus grows up very distant from other people. We start the story with that kind of context, and then we follow Icarus as in school, the friends that he is slowly like talking to become actual friends. Like, he is opening up to them. Like, they kind of force it out of him, they kind of urge it. And then also Icarus goes into Stuart Black's house to steal a painting, and he realizes that the house is not empty. There's this boy named Helios, which ends up being Stuart Black's son, who is under house arrest, living in there and cannot leave. He has like a tracker on his ankle. And so Icarus forms this bond that turns into a romance with Helios, and it's just so sweet and wholesome and beautiful. And I just like want to cry when I think about this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I was debating, and I'm still kind of debating giving it a 5-star because my experience with high school, like, I'm a sophomore in college right now, so I graduated 2 years ago, but my experience with high school was people can be terrible to each other, you know? My high school wasn't a bad school by any means, but all you hear about is just gossip and drama and people like cheating on each other and ruining friendships and people fighting in the hallways and things like that. And so when I read a book like this where it portrays like teenagers just being vulnerable, being emotional, being able to be emotional with each other, supporting each other, recognizing where someone is going through a hard time and being there for them. That's how Icarus was for Helios. That's how Helios was for him. That's what he was for his friends, and vice versa. It was just all so beautiful to see all these people just like being nice humans to each other. Like, we don't see that enough in literature. I mean, there is definitely things that are happening that are terrible in this book, like child abuse and domestic violence, things like that. But on the whole, we just have this beautiful story of kids helping other kids, and it's just amazing. And the prose is also really well written. I wouldn't say it's like flowery and hard to understand because this is a YA book. I would say that the sentences have simple structures to them, but the words that are put together are done so originally, so beautifully. They touch your heart a little bit, you know? At one point, Icarus says that Helios is like his birthright. Like, those are not hard, flowery words, but like just the meaning behind it, after you read this story, you just like get stabbed in the chest. It was an experience to read, and it was so good, and I highly recommend. Don't let the fact that it's a YA book scare you, because this book was just phenomenal. Alright, so with that being said, those are all 9 books that I read in February, but the video is not nearly done yet because we still have to talk about my February TBR that I read and the March TBR that I'm going to pick with y'all. So I picked 4 books for my February TBR. I'm just starting to do monthly TBR, so I'm starting very small, very slowly, using a TBR jar. And the 4 books that I picked were Ekotar, Love Art of Whiskey, Magnolia Parks 3, and If He Had Been With Me. And obviously, by watching this video, you know that I've only read 2 of the books. So I read half of the TBR, which is fine. Not terrible, could be better, but I'm not trying to be harsh on myself. With it, I am a mood reader at heart, so I have to kind of stand by what I want to read. And also I was reading books for videos and stuff this month. So anyway, my attention was elsewhere. But now I want to choose a couple of prompts for my March TBR. And again, this TBR jar was so much fun to do last month, so I'm excited to pull it out again. I have about 30 to 50 prompts in here. I'm just gonna go pick one right now. Let's go do this one. Okay, this says a book that you bought second hand, which is a great prompt because I buy a lot of books secondhand, I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying really hard to work through my physical TBR, which is basically this shelf and then a couple more at the top. So let me look. I just recently did a half-priced books haul in my most recent reading vlog, so there are a couple books that I got in that haul. The book I'm thinking about picking is Alice Feeney's Rock, Paper, Scissors. This is a thriller, so my first ever thriller book, and I bought it secondhand. It's a very quick little less than 300 page book, and I'm really curious to try Alice Feeney because I've only heard amazing things, specifically from creators like Sarah Caroli. She loves this author, and it is bought secondhand. This was like $7. This is option 1. The other option is the next book in the Ekotar series, which I'm also buying secondhand, but just virtually, like digitally. I think it arrived in my mailbox today, but I haven't gone and received it yet, so just imagine me holding a Court of Mist and Fury right now. However, I think I'm gonna pick Alice Feeney anyway because I want to challenge myself to read something out of my comfort zone, and Ekotar I will always pick up. Like, that's easy, but this is a little harder. So this is gonna go on my TBR as the first book. All right, so moving on to the next one. Let's see. This prompt says a book that intimidates you, which, to be honest, Alice Feeney kind of fits that prompt, I won't lie. But I'm not gonna cheat. I'm gonna try to pick another one that's on my TBR that intimidates me. Now, the obvious option is to pick Magnolia Parks because this book is so thick, the font is so small, and the emotional content that I know is going to be in this book is scary. But this was on my last TBR and I never read it, so I'm like, do I want to put it on 2 TBRs back to back? Now, the other option is this little book, which is kind of funny in comparison. It's like kind of half the size. This book actually isn't mine. Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews is a book that my friend gave me for our book exchange, and I think we're going to exchange our books sometime in spring break, which is in March. I need to read this before then, and I have been putting it off because I don't have much interest in it, to be honest. Sorry to my friend. But it's about 400 pages of, I think, some kind of another thriller. Is this thriller? Is it horror? I'm not quite sure. Some kind of literary, not my usual genres, which is actually kind of funny to like to do 2 out of my comfort zone books. But I think that because I need to read this before we exchange books, and I still haven't done so, I've had it for like a month and a half, this needs to go on the TBR. And it does really scare me because I have no clue what I'm getting into, and I've only heard like intimidating things from people talking about this. So I don't know what to expect with this book, but I'm gonna put this on the TBR as a book that intimidates me. And to my friend, if you're watching this, I will text you. Okay. This next prompt says, continue a book series. All right, well, I just filmed a YouTube short talking about all the series that I'm currently in the middle of. A Court of Mist and Fury is an option. Like I said, that one is coming in the mail. Clockwork Princess, that's right here, is also a series I need to continue. This is the last book in the Infernal Devices trilogy that I have yet to finish with my reread. Play Along by Liz Tom Forty. I think because Echo is coming in the mail, that one will be my next one. So I'm gonna put Echo I don't have it with me, but I will have it eventually. But just the picture right here, this is the one I'm going to be continuing. Like I said, I need to continue my reread of the series, and I'm excited about this book for when it comes in. It's my favorite in the series by far. So yeah, this is going to be book 3 on my TBR. Let's do at least one more. A book you love the cover of. This is an amazing prompt. I love this prompt because I like reading pretty books. Like, sue me. Let me look on my shelf. I would love to pick like a standalone because I don't want to like start another series. So I'm like looking at this one up here, which is This Woven Kingdom. I love like the gorgeous like coloring on this cover, but it is a new series, and I'd love to like check a series off of my continuing series list before I pick up something new like this. So another option is this cover, which was on my February TBR, but again, since I didn't want to pick this up in February, I'm probably not gonna want to do so in March. Now this one I also think is stunning, and maybe what I picked, to be honest. I'm trying to get through my physical TBR if you can't tell, and this cover is beautiful. This is Under the Oak Tree, which is, I'm pretty sure, a manga or anime that was recomposed into like written text. I know nothing about what happens in this book. I was just told by the person that I bought it from that it's kind of smutty. So we will just have to see, but I think I'm gonna choose this one because I've had it for a couple months now and I still haven't picked it up yet. So I figured this is probably the month to do it. This is going to be the last pick for my March TBR. So just as a little refresh refresher, we've got Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. This one is a little scary, I'm not gonna lie. Eco Math by Sarah J. Maas, When It Comes in the Mail. And then Under the Oak Tree by, who's this? By Suji Kim. So that's the last book. Hopefully I can read a little more than half this month, but we'll just have to cross our fingers and see. Subscribe, I post new videos every single Thursday. And if you want to watch my most recent vlog, I will have it linked right here on the screen. I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye!